Объясните нам. Ходят все работать в доставку, атакуют беспилотники.
This is Moscow. The giant metropolis of 13 million was shaken by one of the heaviest snowfalls in the last 50 years on January 9th to 10th. Putin was so focused on the war that he surrendered the country to general winter. The giant airports instantly turned into centers of civilian panic. Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, Zhukovsky, and Vnukovo. These four giant gateways of Russia to the world simultaneously shut down. Sheremetyevo Airport has been transformed into a dystopian beach. Thousands of passengers are scattered across the terminals on inflatable mattresses. People have been trying to sleep on concrete floors and mats for days. Trash cans are overflowing, and security has completely disappeared. The chaos is so great that airport management can only distribute a small cup of water to passengers every 3 hours. Food and hygiene are completely out of the question. The anger of people trapped in this environment echoes through the airport terminals. The migrants left, the drones attacked, it snowed, and here's the result. Look at the scene inside. These images are not from a refugee camp, but from Moscow's luxury terminals. With over 120 flights cancelled simultaneously, mountains of luggage have piled up. As piles of luggage piled up uncontrollably in the terminals, outside, planes were stuck in the snow in the middle of the runway. Thousands of people were stranded in the middle of the runway for hours in airplane cabins with non-functioning air conditioning. Snow removal vehicles and aircraft de-icing systems, unable to obtain spare parts due to Western sanctions, proved ineffective against the heavy snowfall. At Domodedovo Airport, an aircraft gets stuck in a massive snowdrift while taxiing. As staff battle with shovels, takeoff hopes melt away. Not only in Moscow, airports in Grozny, Makhachkala, Volgograd, and Vladikavkaz also shut down. Over 300 flights were affected in Moscow alone. 271 delays and 42 cancellations were recorded. Complete chaos and panic reign at the airports. Flights are being largely cancelled, delayed, and tickets refunded. Of course, adverse weather conditions are not the only reason for this situation. As part of Ukraine's "blind the bear" strategy, unidentified drones appearing in Moscow's skies have caused the airspace to be closed multiple times. The Russian Defense Ministry activated the Vnukovo protocol, sacrificing civilian traffic to protect airports. Under this protocol, even a single suspected drone leads to the cancellation of hundreds of flights and dozens of planes waiting in the air, running out of fuel. This infrastructure collapse continues not only in the sky, but also at ground level.
All here. Amazing. The whole street is blocked off. Just kidding.
In Moscow's streets, municipal crews are seen piling snow from main arteries onto side streets instead of clearing it. This situation has led local residents to seek their own justice, protesting by blocking the doors of government buildings with massive snowdrifts. Check out this video. Snow removal crews in Moscow are gathered in the park, shovels in hand, but no one is actually working. It's like a bureaucratic parody from the Soviet era. Lots of plans, lots of people, zero results. According to this social media post, migrant workers are battling the snowstorm in the streets with green shovels, while some Indians have fled in fear of the ice.
Where are your Indians? Where are the Indians? Indians. Where are the Indians? Why aren't they coming to work? Huh? Why aren't the Indians coming? Hey.
Voices are rising. Gde vashi Indusi? Indusi! This image highlights Russia's dependency. While billions flow into the war, snow removal is left to migrants. But are they prepared? No. This is the regime's negligence. The people are stranded in the cold, the economy is suffering, and migration policies are causing disaster. Even worse, some Chinese-made vehicles, which Russia offers as an alternative to Western cars, are failing the winter test. At temperatures dropping to -20 degrees, these vehicles' door locks freeze, their touchscreens fail, and their electronic brains shut down. This technically demonstrates how fragile and unreliable Russia's import dependency has become. You're asking why all this is happening? Here's the proof. Putin and Manturov are sitting in the Kremlin, talking about industrial growth. 170 new projects, national goals. But outside, airports are paralyzed, roads are blocked. Putin's weary face says it all. With war expenditures looming, the snowstorm takes a back seat. This logistical paralysis in Moscow triggers a domino effect that is much deeper than a simple delay. The first wave is the shaking of Russia's internal front unity. The illusion of war is far away, the capital is safe, that Putin promised his people is gone, along with the tens of thousands of people trying to sleep on the cold floor of Sheremetyevo. When the people see that the state cannot even maintain basic transportation services, their trust in the regime gives way to deep panic and chaos. The economic wave is even more devastating. Moscow handles 40% of all air traffic in Russia. The paralysis of this hub instantly wiped out 30% of Airlines' daily revenue, while the shares of giants like Aeroflot experience sharp declines of up to 5% on the MOEX. Market analysts predict that this crisis will erode quarterly profits by 10%. Rerouting each aircraft to another airport imposes an additional fuel and service cost of 2 million rubles on companies. Airlines were unable to deliver thousands of pieces of luggage to their owners and had to deliver them to homes by truck. This operational burden created a sudden cost explosion for already struggling airlines. The cancellation of a Boeing 737-800 flight translates to a direct loss of between 15 and 23 million rubles, depending on the route. The cost of this two-day snow and drone blockade to the Russian airline sector is staggering. A full 20 billion rubles, or approximately 186 million pounds, vanished in an instant. When Russia's mandatory compensation laws and passengers' hotel expenses are added to the mix, the Russian airline industry is entering a full-blown strangulation process. The psychological threshold has long been crossed. Russia's airline fleet is already old, consisting of aircraft with an average age of 15 years. While spare parts are unavailable due to Western sanctions, war budgets have drained infrastructure investments. The lack of snow-clearing equipment is the main reason for the misery at Moscow's gates. As people seek shelter among piles of trash, Russia's claim to be a modern superpower is gasping for breath in those terminals. The aviation sector, expected to shrink by 10% in 2025, has thrown its 2026 growth forecasts into the trash along with this storm. For the Russian economy, this Moscow-centered shutdown is not a single transportation disruption. It is producing a chain reaction of economic repercussions. The reason is simple but critical. Moscow alone produces about 20% of Russia's total GDP. It is the hub for finance, services, tourism, logistics, and decision-making processes. Air traffic functions like the blood circulation of this ecosystem. When the blood flow stops, the effects spread throughout the economy within hours. January is a period in Russia when people return from vacation and business calendars reopen. At this time, the disruption of domestic flights directly impacted tourism and business travel. Hotel occupancy rates fell, restaurants and the service sector were left empty. A short-term loss of 5 to 10% in tourism revenue is a reasonable estimate. At the same time, air cargo delays further strained supply chains that were already fragile due to sanctions. Delays in the delivery of electronics, pharmaceuticals, and critical intermediate goods have the potential to add 0.1 to 0.2 percentage points of additional pressure to inflation. Traffic jams of up to 8 hours in cities reduced productivity. Meetings were cancelled, deliveries were disrupted. Under these conditions, it is not surprising that the daily GDP loss reached 10 to 20 billion rubles. For Russia, which has the world's largest land area, civil aviation is not a luxury item. It is the backbone of national unity. The country spans 11 time zones, and central administration, the economy, and military logistics in this geography can only be sustained by fast, regular, and reliable air transport. Traveling from Moscow to Novosibirsk or Vladivostok by road or rail takes weeks, not days. In winter conditions, this time effectively increases. Therefore, the daily functioning of the state, budget flows, critical industrial inputs, health and food supplies, command and control, and even governors' contact with the center depend on planes taking off on time. When this backbone breaks, the result is not just delayed travel. The center-periphery link weakens. Regional centers in Siberia and the Far East face the risk of becoming logistically cut off from Moscow. The flow of spare parts, medicines, high-value added equipment, and personnel is disrupted. This leads to production stoppages in the economy, delays in public administration decisions, and longer reaction times in military logistics. More importantly, this situation directly threatens Putin's vertical power model. The vertical model is based on the rapid transmission of orders and immediate feedback. A governor's inability to fly to Moscow, a ministry's inability to send a team to the field, or the failure of critical materials to reach Siberia on time erodes the actual power of the central authority. In such a scenario, regional initiatives increase, local crises begin to be managed independently of the center, and fertile ground is created for separatist rhetoric. Therefore, a collapse in civil aviation is not just a transportation crisis in Russia, it is a structural risk to federal integrity. The third wave is the reflection of technological asymmetry in civilian life. Using cheap, mass-produced drones, Ukraine managed to shut down Russia's multi-billion-dollar civil aviation infrastructure at a cost of thousands of dollars without shooting down a single aircraft. Putin's air defense systems were so finely spread out to protect the Kremlin and military bases that civil air corridors and logistics centers were left completely defenseless. How can the Kremlin ensure the safety of its people when it cannot even protect its capital? This question has now become the main topic of discussion, not only in analyses but also among ordinary citizens. When we focus on the big picture, the transportation collapse in Moscow is not just a climatic misfortune, but the ultimate result of the erosion of Russia's state capacity. The Putin regime channeled all of the country's resources, trained personnel, and technical capacity to the front lines. This situation gave rise to a new strategic vulnerability that we call civil infrastructure bankruptcy. The mobilization of a significant portion of the technical personnel and snow removal crews at airports to the front lines wiped out operational capacity in the capital. This situation is directly linked to the collapse of the home front. The physical destruction of war is no longer just the fate of Ukrainian cities. It has entered Russia's own kitchen, its own streets, and its own transportation network. The shutdown of Moscow's airports is the effective tearing up of the Kremlin's stability in exchange for obedience contract with its people. Stability is now a thing of the past. It has been replaced by uncontrollable fear and uncertainty. Strategically, Russia's civil aviation can now be considered in a vegetative state. Cut off from Western technology and condemned to China's low-quality, cold, unfriendly products, Russia is becoming an isolated island in the modern world. Chinese cars freezing in the Moscow winter is not just an automotive problem. It is a strategic trap created by Russia's dependence on its new allies. Consequently, when the harshness of nature and Ukraine's smart drone strategy converge, the image of a powerful Russia that Putin has built is melting away on inflatable mattresses at airports. This is the process of the empire suffocating, not only on the front lines, but logistically, technically, and morally, starting from its own center. The chaos in Moscow should be read as the precursor tremors of a larger collapse, an impending mutiny or social explosion. When the switches were flipped that night in Moscow, it wasn't just flights that stopped. Putin's illusion of invincibility also came to a halt. This colossal capital, gasping for breath under a deluge of snow and steel, is now the symbol of a system rotting from within. That helpless wait at the airports is, in fact, a portrait of Russia's future. Civil aviation gone, logistics security destroyed, and public confidence devastated. Nothing will ever be the same for Moscow. Because the war, with all its destructive force, is now in Putin's own backyard. Stay tuned, because this chaos is only the beginning. To get the latest updates on new videos and in-depth analysis, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Stay with PPR Global in pursuit of the truth. Thank you for choosing us.